Hello, welcome all to the 5th annual general meeting, half decade of the Canadian Business History Association, l'Association Canadienne pour l'Histoire des Affaires. Bonjour. Je m'appelle Dimitri Anastakis, and I have had the pleasure of acting as a director of the organization over the past several years, and I've been fortunate enough to come back as chair of the organization just recently after taking some time away. This year, our AGM and special guest speaker are being presented online virtually because, as we all know, we are in the middle of a global health pandemic. As a result, I'd like to outline a few procedures for everyone to follow during the AGM. First, please do keep your microphones on mute throughout the presentations. If you would like to ask a question, please type your question in using the chat function located at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and Mark Bonham is organizing the Zoom, but I will also be able to see the questions as well. So if any questions do arise, we should all be able to see them. Second, in terms of matters that deal with voting, when it comes to voting on agenda items, we had previously asked that members submit their voting preferences by proxy, and we have received a great number of proxies for this purpose. So when it comes to voting, if you have a proxy in there, it's already taken care of. If you did not submit a proxy and you wish to register your vote, please use the chat function. So there are different ways. You can just vote saying yes. You can also vote using a thumbs up in the chat if need be. We will note your voting preference, and unless otherwise specified, unless Mark Bonham, our Secretary Treasurer, indicates otherwise, that's the way we'll run the voting. In terms of documents, on today's agenda, we do have a set of formal business items to attend to, all of which make up the basis of governance of the organization in terms of reporting on its membership, having a report on the financial condition of the organization, and other information for the organization itself. After we address these formal matters, which we're required to do, and following a short interim break, we will hear a talk from our guest speaker, Professor Brian Gettler, who is a faculty member at the University of Toronto. So to begin, let us pay attention to the formal business items that must be dealt with at an annual general meeting. These are the required aspects of our organization in terms of accountability, transparency, etc. At this point, I'd like to call upon the Secretary Treasurer of the CBHA, ACHA, Mr. Mark Bonham, to provide his report on the requirement that proper notice has been given to the members and a necessary quorum is present to conduct the business of the meeting. Go ahead, Mark.
Great. Well, thank you, Dimitri. As Secretary Treasurer of the CBHA, ACHA, I hereby confirm that the proper notice of this meeting, pursuant to bylaw number 1, section 10.04, that being 21 days notice, has been provided to all members. I also hereby confirm that the form of the notice, pursuant to bylaw number 1, section 12, has also been met. I also confirm that the requirement under bylaw number 1, section 10.01, that an annual general meeting must be held, has now been met by the conducting of this meeting. I also confirm that pursuant to bylaw number 1, section 10.10, a quorum is present at this meeting in person or by proxy to properly conduct the affairs of the meeting, and that the meeting may now proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I would now like to introduce the president of our association to address the audience and provide some comments on the past year's activities. As many of you know, Joe Martin is the former director of the Canadian Business and Financial History Initiative at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto, and is also president emeritus of Canada's History Society. His current research and some of his past research is focused on the development of case studies about Canadian business in a global context. But as many of you know, he recently completed and published a book comparing the Canadian and American financial systems from the late 18th century to 2008. And it's a real pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Joe Martin. Go ahead, President Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't think any of us could have imagined 5 years ago that, first of all, we would be praying that we lasted 5 years, and we have, and we've lasted very well, I might say, but we never would have thought that we'd be having an annual meeting like this. But we have been busy preserving and presenting Canadian business history. Our registrants for the conference come from all parts of Canada, from Quebec West, although unfortunately no one from Atlantic Canada. We have to do something about that. From 6 American states, Florida, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, and the District of Columbia, and from England. Only 2 universities represented, but they happen to be Oxford and Cambridge, which isn't bad. In this highly impersonal environment imposed upon us by COVID, let me give a shout out to some of you in the audience to show the diversity of our organization, and that in spite of COVID, we are still a human organization. Derek Beattie, an investment banker with BMO Nesbitt Burns in Calgary. Lynn Carlo from George Brown, but also the very active chair of the Enoch Turner Schoolhouse Foundation, the oldest free school in Toronto. Lindsay Shaddy, now resident in Peterborough, Ontario, working with the Seaboard Group. Michael Stam, professor at Michigan State and the 2019 winner of the Best Business History Award for Dead Tree Media. We present the award biannually and will be doing so again this year. Arnie Thorstensen, president of Shelter Canadian Properties in Winnipeg. And I'm particularly pleased to see Paul-Andre Linto, a relatively new member of our body, professor emeritus from the University of Quebec at Montreal, one of Canada's leading historians, but also an old friend from the days when we were on the founding board of Canada's History, publisher of what was then known as the Beaver. One of the benefits of being on the original board of CHS is that I can remember what it was like when CHS was only 5. Now they are in their mid-20s. It is difficult to believe how far or fast they have come. Mind you, they had the backing of the Hudson Bay History Foundation and then got very lucky, a lucky break with Governor General Romeo LeBlanc wanting to call the annual Teachers Award the Governor General's Award. But in life, I think luck and serendipity play a big part. We've had a few breaks, not the least having an anonymous donor who provides $10,000 biannually for the book award, and a hard-working group of directors and involved members. We have had challenges too in the first 5 years. The biggest, I guess, was losing the late Chris Kobrak, who inspired the creation of the association, who died so suddenly 4 years ago this month. As well as that, some of us on the board have had other health issues. Perhaps most importantly, we have not yet been able to gain the support of either the Canadian Chamber of Commerce or the Toronto Board of Trade. The chambers have been crucial to the success of the European Business Associations, GUG in Germany, the Swedish Center for Business History, and other European countries. So if you happen to know anyone on the board of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, I would sure like to know, because we're going to make one last push to get them to support us. On the past 5 years, we have organized conferences on important business history topics, published books, have a well-read newsletter prospectus, which comes out regularly, not a small achievement, and is archived, and an online YouTube channel. We provide money for grants and scholarships and had member events, including nationally known speakers. These activities have been principally in Toronto, but also in Montreal, Ottawa, and Winnipeg. Now, let's get to 2020, the year of COVID. I don't think I'd have facial hair if it wasn't for COVID, little things like that. We all had to adapt. The first challenge is what were we going to do about the conference scheduled for in November of 2020 in Winnipeg on the 350th anniversary of the Hudson's Bay Company and the 150th anniversary of Manitoba's entry into Confederation. Our innovative Secretary Treasurer, Mark Bonham, came up with the idea of monthly CBH talks modeled on the TED Talks. And we started with the price of gold in September, the highly popular pandemic topic in October, coffee, liquor, and cannabis in November. And we didn't forget about the HBC and Manitoba anniversaries. They were the subject of the December talk. 3 of our 4 sessions were moderated by board members, and the 4th by Janet Walker, CEO of Canada's Historical History Society in Winnipeg. Our panelists came to us not only from Toronto, but also from the University of Hertfordshire in England, Montreal, Prince Edward County in Ontario, Winnipeg, and Slave Lake, Alberta. COVID and Zoom permitted us to have panelists from these different places, as well as participants from Nova Scotia and PEI, but not New Brunswick and Newfoundland, and Labrador, England, other than Oxbridge, Northern Ireland, Mexico, Australia, and more American states, Connecticut, Missouri, Ohio, and Texas. And as you know, we were beginning 2021 with Brian Gertler talking about money and monopoly in the 19th and 20th century fur trade as soon as the formal program is over. February 19th, Andrea Benoit will speak on her 2020 Best Business Book Award winner, Corporate Social Responsibility and the Cultural Practices of MAC Cosmetics. We are still working on March, but we hope to have an archival topic, and I've been in touch with 3 of our archive members. On April 14th, we will be recognized the Sesquicentennial of what I personally consider probably the most important business history event. I'm in a minority, I recognize, but it's the Sesquicentennial of the 1871 Bank Act, which has stood Canada in such good stead as evidenced in 2008, in contrast to the United States. And if you do any search online, you constantly see references to the high quality of the banking system. And very, very few people understand the drama and excitement that resulted in the passage of that act. That was on April 14th, it received the Royal Proclamation. Other plans are being developed. I should tell you, around that particular Sesquicentennial event, I will be speaking at the York Club of Toronto on the topic. And we are working with former executives of the Canadian Canadian Banking Association on this project. You're all aware of Prospectus, our monthly newsletter, which comes out like clockwork with all kinds of relevant information. We have what could only be called a leading edge website and an online YouTube channel. One of my Florida friends was unable to view our December talk and was mightily impressed that we had a YouTube channel. We're very excited that we have 2 new corporate members this year. The National Bank of Canada still leaves us only the Royal Bank of Canada to go. So if anyone has influenced the Royal Bank, please let me know. And Redpath Sugar. And we partnered with Canada's History Society to offer a 1-year complimentary subscription to our new members. Personally, I feel fortunate to work with the volunteers I do on this important endeavor. I'm pleased we've begun the process of board renewal, and I'm looking forward in the not too distant future to being replaced as president. This past year, my main activity related to the 350th anniversary of the HBC. Canada's History magazine had a special edition April-May and asked me to write how the Bay survived for 350 years. And unlike some strategists, I think survival for 350 years is a huge accomplishment, although I have not the slightest idea what the future holds for that distinguished company. I was, it certainly has its challenges. Dimitri and I put together a panel for the Business History Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina in the spring, but unfortunately COVID interfered with that. I was able to give talks about the HBC's 350th to the Ontario chapter of financial executives, the York Club of Toronto, and as part of CBH Talk number 4 on the anniversaries of HBC in the province of Manitoba. We achieved a lot in 5 years, and we've achieved a lot in the year past, the COVID year. I'm confident we'll achieve even more in the next 5 years as we work to preserve and present Canadian business history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. That's much appreciated. That's a great report. And again, thank you for all your work on behalf of the organization and in general for Canadian business history. It's now time for us to consider our first set of motions for the meeting, the election of directors to the CBHA ACHA. Under the bylaws of the corporation, directors are elected to 3-year rotating terms. As such, in this 5th annual meeting of shareholders, of members, there are a set of directors to be elected with a 3-year term. The motion to be put forward to the meeting is as follows: that the following directors are to be elected to a 3-year term: Professor Danica Belisle, Mr. Mark S. Bonham, Professor Donald Nervous, and Mr. Stephen Salmon. Now, the biographies of these individuals were provided in the meeting materials forwarded to all members with the notice of this meeting, so you may refer to them if you have not done so. May I ask that a member move that this motion is presented? You may indicate it by raising a hand or putting a thumbs up. In your Zoom, I'll take, okay, Andrew Ross has moved. Is there a seconder for the motion? Michael Stam, a seconder. Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion? If not, I will call for a vote on the motion. I do not see any questions or arms raised, hands raised. Those in favor, please indicate as such. Okay. There are a number, there's a few in the chat session as well. Okay. Those opposed, please indicate as such. Michael, you have your hand still up, are you okay? It's okay. Okay, from my perspective, the ayes have it and the motion is carried. So welcome and congratulations to those members re-elected to the board. Thank you for your work. We very much appreciate it, your willingness to stand for another 3-year term in this voluntary organization. We now turn our attention to the financial affairs of the CBHA ACHA. For this, I will ask the Secretary Treasurer of the organization, again, Mr. Bonham, to provide his report. Mark, please go ahead.
Thank you again, Dimitri. In reviewing the financial statements of the CBHA ACHA, please remember that these are 12 months reviewed reports by an external auditor to September 30th of 2020, with a comparison to the same time period in 2019. And without a doubt, of course, the global health pandemic materially affected the financial affairs of the organization, as it did all nonprofit organizations. Despite this challenge, it gives me great pleasure to state that your board and management was able to adapt very quickly to the situation, to the extent that there has been no material negative financial impact on the CBHA ACHA as of this time. My comments, of course, will include references to this unusual event. So revenues of the organization come from membership fees, conference income, and book sales. Despite the pandemic, membership fees actually increased in fiscal 2020 to $19,375 compared to $17,825 in the previous year. The pandemic and restrictions on global travel meant that there was no conference income in 2020, which is usually a substantial part of our revenues, compared to conference net income net of expenses of $10,820 in fiscal 2019. A very small amount of revenue is earned from book sales and investment income. Expenses of the organization to September 30th, 2020 can be broken down into four principal areas. The organization expenses incurred in operating the CBHA, ACHA, the expenses of holding an annual conference when such is held, the costs associated with printing the conference book and grants and so on, and also grants and scholarships and awards to members. In the first category, the principal expenses relate to managing the organization's website, its membership, and other communication activities such as the newsletter and so on. The costs associated with the ongoing promotion of the organization and daily administrative tasks. These organizational expenses totaled $12,714 in 2020, a very significant decline from 2019 when it was $17,908. And of course, such a large reduction can be attributed principally to less administrative activity as a result of the COVID shutdown. The organization created a scholarship and awards committee which solicits applications from members and presents such awards. This committee has set up criteria for the awarding of research grants, travel grants, and other types of scholarship grants for members, including an appropriate application form and review procedure. However, with the global pandemic, most academic conferences and events were canceled or moved to an online virtual basis in the past year. As a result of this, grant applications declined materially, and grant awards declined to only 5,500 in 2020 compared to 22,000 in 2019. In 2019, the CBHA ACHA published a book that came from the conference held in the fiscal 2019 called Trade-Offs, The History of Canada-US Trade Negotiations. Since there was no conference in 2020, there was no expenses related to book publications in our past year. Turning to the balance sheet, the operations of the organization were financed from the revenues earned and the cash and investment balance. The board reviews the cash flow forecast for the organization on a regular basis to ensure the financial sustainability of the organization as a nonprofit. The organization recorded a very small net profit for 2020 of $1,608 compared to a loss in 2019 of $23,362. That loss in 2019 offset significant gains made in 2018 and 2017. Because as a nonprofit organization, as expected, we're not expected nor allowed to earn consistent annual profits. Because the CBHA is a nonprofit, its success depends almost entirely on its ability to retain membership. So your management is dedicated to continue to grow that membership across all of its categories to ensure the long-term viability of the organization and the continued promotion of Canadian business history. So that summarizes our financial reports for 2020, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions from colleagues for our Secretary Treasurer? Okay, well, if there aren't any, I'll say thank you to Mark. I would now like to present the following motion to members. That the financial statements of the organization for the period ended September 30th, 2020 are hereby accepted and approved. I have presented the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Thank you. Thank you, Indra. Thank you. A seconder for the motion. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion in light of what Mark's just presented and the documents that you have? If not, I will call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Thumbs up. Okay. All those against? I think there's a couple of thumbs that have to go down. And I can ask for abstentions if anyone does wish to abstain as well. Again, from my perspective, the ayes have it, and I will declare the motion carried. Thank you, Mark. As part of the administration of our organization, I have an additional motion I would like to present. The motion is to the members that the organization reappoint Ms. Hema Murcock, Chartered Accountant, as the review auditor for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. I have presented the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Andrew. Is there any discussion or questions regarding the motion around the auditor for the organization's finances? If not, then I will call the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand or indicate through Zoom. Okay. All those opposed? I'm going to wait for some of the thumbs to go down. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. From my perspective, the ayes have it, and I declare the motion carried. I would now, as a board member, present to you a report on membership. In terms of individual members, I'm pleased to report that we have a total of 174 individual members of the CBHA, ACHA as of this date, which is an increase from 148 in 2019 and 131 in 2018. This is a good news and an indicator of positive growth for our membership. These members are a mix of academics, archivists, corporate executives, students, and young or emerging scholars or archivists, and the general public as well. The 2020 annual report presents a graphical breakdown of this membership, which shows that we have members from across Canada and a good number of international members as well. And I encourage you to take a look at the membership report. Further, I'm particularly pleased to report on the substantial increase in subscribers to our monthly newsletter, which is one of the highlights of membership and one of the really interesting and useful aspects of our organization. As of today, there are over 1,600 monthly subscribers to the CBHA, ACHA newsletter, which compares to about 1,200 subscribers in 2019. So obviously a silver lining of COVID and the digitization of our operations is that we have an increase in the number of monthly subscribers to our newsletter. This represents a tremendous interest in what we in the CBHA, the ACHA do in terms of contributing to the community, and it's a very good sign in terms of positive growth. Our aim is to try to convert a lot more of those newsletter subscribers into members going forward. In terms of our corporate membership, we have 11 charter large corporate members, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize them and their support in the order which they joined the organization. These large corporate members include Toronto Dominion Financial Group, Scotiabank, Great West Life Assurance Company, Canada Life Assurance Company, London Life Assurance Company, the CIBC, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, the Bank of Montreal, BMO, the Hudson's Bay Company History Foundation, Deloitte, National Bank Financial, and Redpath Sugar. Obviously, it's a list of amazing organizations and institutions, and we thank them for their support. We also have 2 small corporate members, and I'd like to recognize them as well: Heathbridge Capital Management and Cameron Stevens Mortgage Capital Incorporated. Again, thank you to our corporate members, and of course to our members in general. We like to thank all of the members and corporate supporters for their continued support. I'd also like to take a moment to make a few general comments about membership and what we've planned for the organization over the coming year, which really reinforces some of the things that President Martin mentioned, and also what Secretary Treasurer Bonham have mentioned. As we all know, this has been an incredibly challenging year for everyone. The CBHA, ACHA has weathered this storm and continues to work towards achieving the mandate of the organization, which is to advance Canadian business history and the study of business history in Canada So it's not exclusively for Canadian business history, but we try to cast a broad net in terms of what we're trying to do and to advance. In that regard, we do have a few initiatives for the coming year which build upon this commitment. And again, I'm reinforcing some of the comments made by Joe. First, like many organizations impacted by the pandemic, we were not able to hold our annual conference. Instead, as mentioned, we have, like many others, shifted our outreach online. As part of this, we have launched our very successful CBHA, ACHA talks. We've hosted a few of these since the fall, and Professor Gettler's presentation today is the latest in this series. So we continue to build on the momentum that the CBHA talks are about. As already mentioned by both Mark and Joe, we will be holding a number of these going forward, and I will remind members of our next CBHA talk, which is happening in February. I'll give you the details, the specific details at the end of the event that we're having today. It's also our hope on the board and in general in the membership that depending on how things develop around the pandemic and the schedule for vaccinations, like so many organizations, institutions, like ordinary families and people, we're hopeful that we can inform the membership at some point of upcoming in-person events, hopefully by the end of 2021 or certainly in 2022. That's the aim, that's the goal. And we will be, telling members about what we do have planned depending on the schedule of how things work out. Obviously, we'd all like to get back to some in-person events. Everybody would to some degree. And we look forward to coming back very strong in terms of a schedule of events in the foreseeable and hopefully not too distant future. The second thing is I'm happy to remind the membership that the biannual CBHA Best Book competition will be awarded this year with a prize of $10,000, which is generously funded by an anonymous donor. This is a very competitive and prestigious book prize. It's one of the most it's one of the best prizes in Canada in terms of book prizes, to be frank. And it's great that we are in the second year because this is biannual. I did want to mention to members that if you do know of a book that could potentially speak to issues in Canadian business history or has been written by someone who is speaking to business generally, please make sure that you tell people about the prize and that it is submitted for the competition by the end of February. The deadline is the last day of February, and we have already received a number of entries for the prize, and we look forward to receiving some more. I should also point out that we have a jury for the prize, and that includes Professor Jason Russell of Empire State College, who is a member of the CBHA board, Professor Mark Kuhlberg of Laurentian University, who is a past winner of the CBHA Best Book Prize, and Mr. Don Newman, formerly of CBC, who is one of Canada's most well-known and decorated journalists. So it's a great prize committee and a great jury for this event going forward. Third, I'm pleased to announce that for the first time this year, the CBHA has launched an annual prize for best scholarly or a long-form journalistic article in Canadian business history. Again, I ask members to make sure that if you are aware of any articles that you've seen, not just in the scholarly world in terms of academic publishing, but if you've seen stuff in magazines and the Report on Business, that is a long-form piece of journalistic writing that speaks to issues in Canadian business history, that you notify members of the board, you notify myself, you notify the author so that potentially those pieces can be submitted. This is the first year that we will be awarding this annual prize. And I'd like to specifically thank Danica Belisle, Professor Danica Belisle, for being also on the jury for this prize, but also being one of the initiators of this award. And we look forward to getting submissions, hopefully many submissions by the deadline, which will be also at the end of February. Fourth, I'd like to notify members of initiative by the board's development committee. I would ask all members to please, if they get a chance, to visit the CBHA ACHA website to take part in a member survey. We are canvassing our members in terms of gathering information about membership fees, items of interest and usefulness, or anything else that we think would be useful in terms of surveying our membership, finding out what's on the minds of our members so that we can be as responsive as possible to the membership's needs and desires in terms of where they see the direction of the organization going. So whenever you get a chance, please do visit the website and fill out the member survey. It will really help our organization outline priorities for the future, so we greatly appreciate it if people do so. So while our activities have been curtailed somewhat by the pandemic, as Mark and Joe have outlined, we remain active and committed to the mandate of the organization. In closing my remarks, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our board members, all of our members, and especially to Mark Bonham, our Secretary Treasurer, and Joe Martin, our President, for their tireless work in advancing the work of this organization. This is a voluntary organization, and both of these members are very busy, but they contribute amazing amounts of time and effort to building the profile of business history in Canada through this organization. We're incredibly appreciative of this work, especially this year when it's been so challenging. So thank you, Mark and Joe, and I'd like to just publicly give them a round of applause, and I encourage everyone to do so as well. Thank you so much. At this juncture, I'd like to open the floor to any general questions or comments from the members present on any of the aspects that have been discussed heretofore in our annual general meeting. Are there any questions or comments that people would like to share? Okay, well, if you do have other items that you'd like to discuss, please make sure you get in touch directly. My email is readily accessible, as are the board members, and we encourage as much interaction with the members as possible. So if anything's on your mind, get in touch with us and we will do our best to meet whatever concerns or questions that you might have. With that, I'd like to conclude the formal business matters of the annual general meeting.